All right, cool. All right. Oh, also, I mean, I don't swear much here, but
Okay.
you're welcome to if you want to. So just so
Appreciate
you
that.
know,
All
you
right,
don't have to
cool.
hold back.
All right.
All right, so we're going to welcome onto the show Mark Schofield. He is from InsideThePylon.com and the Locked On Patriots podcast. One of the most knowledgeable guys about the Patriots, so we appreciate him coming on. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Pat, thanks so much for having me on. Thanks for the kind words in the intro there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So obviously, yesterday, some crazy news. Yes, well, I guess if you're listening to this on Thursday, it was 2 days ago, but the Brandon Cooks trade kind of came out of left field, surprised some people. I guess maybe with Belichick and knowing the way he likes to get value for his players and his assets, it probably shouldn't have come out of left field. But I know it surprised the hell out of me.
Yeah, I mean, it surprised me too, Pat. And, I think, like you said there, given what we know about Belichick and how he conducts business, it probably shouldn't have surprised us. I mean, Cooks is going to look to get paid. He's going to look to renegotiate a new contract. So it's one of those deals like we saw with other guys, with Chandler Jones and others, where rather than extend a guy, rather than give somebody a big contract, might as well get what they can for him. And so they move up in terms of, getting a better first round pick than they traded for him. Now they've got two picks now at 23 and 31 in the first round. And that's allowed everybody to sort of engage in some speculation over the past 24 hours. What are they going to do? Are they making the move up? Because, and I was on radio in Charlotte this morning. And that was the first question they asked me. Are the Patriots going to go get a quarterback? Because when you see a team accumulate first round picks or move up in the first round, that's your first thought. But as we're probably going to talk about, that's probably not what Belichick's going to do. I mean, it would seem to be sort of not the best move given where they are right now, given the roster as it's currently constructed. But you can't help but speculate. And we know they were going to be interested in a quarterback this draft. You know that they were probably going to draft somebody at this point, given the fact that Brady is getting older. That window is going to close. And now it allows us to wonder, Lamar Jackson, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, who knows? So it will be interesting. But as far as the Cooks trade, yeah, this is typical Belichick. Get what you can out of a guy during the season. If you can maximize value by moving him, that's what he's going to do.
Right. Well, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I and we'll touch on where they'll go and whether they'll draft a quarterback or not. But I think they won the trade. I mean, when I first saw it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. They traded Cooks. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, number 23 overall. And they gave up Cooks in a fourth, but they got back 23 and a sixth. Like, I mean, I think that's a huge win for the Patriots there, especially where they definitely weren't going to re-sign him at the end of the year. There was no way they were paying him $15 million. And so, I think that trade-wise, it was a big win for the Patriots. And, the Rams are obviously clearly loading up, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, but even still, you're giving up a lot for, 1 year of a receiver unless you can kind of tempt him to stick around,
Right. And, the word is that they are going to explore re-signing him. They're going to try to work on an extension with him. But, the Rams are, they're in that advantageous position where you've got a rookie quarterback playing well in his rookie deal. So you can go and spend capital, draft capital, salary cap space, whatever you want on other positions. I mean, that's what the Rams are doing. That's what the Eagles were able to do this year with Carson Wentz on his deal. Patriots have to do other things. They're paying Brady a little bit more than, most quarterbacks in the league. So they've got to spread money and do other things different ways. And by getting that, like you said, Pat, by getting 23, that opens up a lot of options. They can package 23 and 31 and move up into the teens. They can add stuff to that and try to get into the, 8, 9, 10 range. So there's things they can do. They can stand pat. I mean, the last time they had 2 first-round picks was Dante Hightower and Chandler Jones. They addressed positions of need, positions that would contribute right away. They didn't go get a quarterback back then, so maybe they don't do it now. And maybe they stay tight at 23 and 31 and get 2 guys that they need at different spots. Or maybe they get a quarterback. I mean, it gives them some versatility in how they want to address the first round.
Yeah. I think interestingly enough, in 2012, they actually traded up with both of those picks, like 1 or 2 picks, because they had identified those 2 guys, right? So, I mean, maybe you see something like that. But, we were talking about it before we started the interview, but I can't imagine, them giving up. Because first of all, like you said, they're going to get into the teens. If they package 23 and 31, it gets them into the teens. If they want, Josh Rosen, which I know is your guy, or, whoever else, one of those other guys, Josh Allen or Baker Mayfield or whoever else, they're going to have to get up into the top 5. And that means they're going to have to give up, maybe another first round pick or, a second and a third round pick. And I don't see the benefit of doing that.
Yeah, it would be tough to do. I mean, using, and not that everybody uses this, but that sort of like draft guide value chart, draft pick value chart to try to get to 2, because I think that's where you'd have to get. You'd have to get in front of the Jets at 3. You'd have to trade all 5 of the picks they have in the first 3 rounds plus extra stuff to get to 2. And is that really worth it when you've got maybe 2 good years of Brady left? We've got maybe 2 good years of Gronkowski left. Does it really make sense to mortgage, the now to go get Josh Rosen? And as much as I like Josh Rosen, if you draft him and you're the New England Patriots, he's not seeing the field for 2 years. He's not going to start over Tom Brady. So it doesn't make sense. Like, I'd much rather them, if they've identified, say, like a Lamar Jackson or a Mason Rudolph, and he's still on the board at, say, 14, right before the Arizona Cardinals pick, and you're worried about them, then maybe try to get up to 14. And if you can't, fine, see how the chips fall, draft your 2 guys. Maybe if one of these guys gets past, 15, then maybe move up. But I'm much more comfortable, and this was the thought I had before they made this trade, staying pat at 31, not shooting your shot on a first-round quarterback, drafting a guy like, say, a Mike White, a Kyle Lauletta, one of these, good, solid guys that you can develop with the 2 years you have with Brady, and address other positions of need so you can make another Super Bowl run next year with the greatest quarterback of all time on your roster.
Yeah. I mean, that makes so much more sense. And they've done that twice and been pretty successful. I mean, you're not going to hit on all of them, but Jimmy G obviously looks pretty darn good. And Jacoby Brissett played very well for Indianapolis last year. So, those are 2 mid-round quarterbacks that you're like, oh my God, like, they kind of hit on both of those guys. Now, the one thing I know about Kyle Lauletta is that there's no way the Patriots are going to draft him because everybody is talking about the Patriots drafting him.
That's exactly right, Pat. I mean, this as well as I do, as well as anybody else does. When you try to get into that mind of Bill Belichick, it's a scary place, and you can try to predict, and you can have all the information available and think you've got it locked down, and he's going to do the exact opposite thing. Right. And that's just the way he is. I mean, he's just unpredictable. And everybody has been saying, look, Kyle Lauletta, there's the lacrosse background, the Naval Academy connections, all that stuff. He's a Patriot for life, right? I'm sure they probably don't even have him on their draft board at this point. That's just the way they work. But I mean, if Mike White, a Logan Woodside, a Chase Liddon, like there are some developmental guys that you can take that flyer on and say the 3rd, 4th round. And if, they don't pan out, you're going to be able to address the quarterback position next year or the year after that. Because, let's remember, 16 drafts since Brady, they've taken 8 quarterbacks. I mean, they basically do it every other year where they're going to draft a quarterback because, like Belichick said when they drafted Garoppolo, it's better to be a year ahead of schedule than a year behind schedule, because then you're like the Cowboys the year that Romo got hurt and they didn't have Dak Prescott and they were lost. New England doesn't like to lose seasons. Belichick doesn't like to waste seasons. And so he's going to want to have an answer sooner rather than later. Other thing to remember, they do have Brian Hoyer. I mean, it's not like he's the greatest quarterback of all time or anything like that, but he's a serviceable backup. And so if they draft a more developmental type and say, God forbid, Brady gets hurt, not a season ender, but like a 4-week type thing, and they don't feel comfortable with the rookie, they can run with Brian Hoyer for a couple of weeks. And so it's not a situation where they're desperate to go get a guy. Everybody likes talking about, quarterbacks because it's the position everybody likes to watch. It's the sexy position in football. The fact of the matter is you need 21 other guys on your starting lineup on both sides of the ball, and they have other positions of need to address.
Right. No, I totally agree. So if they do stay pat at 23 and 31, what are some names out there that maybe, they should look for? There was the kid, I for the life of me cannot remember his name. He's a linebacker from Alabama who they said is all over the field and kind of plays.
Yeah,
that's the
Sean
guy.
Evans. Yeah.
And so I don't know if he's going to be – I mean, they would some talk about maybe he'd last to 31, but they didn't think he would. And then I was like, as soon as they traded for 23, I was like, wait a second. Rashaan Evans, now that guy might be available at 23 if he's not at 31, and maybe that's the type of guy that they need. And so maybe they don't go Alabama again, but we all know the Saban ties, and the last linebacker they drafted from Alabama worked out pretty darn well. So, maybe you try it again. I don't know. I mean, are there other guys they might be looking at? Or
I mean, I look at it and say, 3 positions Yeah, we'll say three positions of need they could probably address in that range. You could say corner, you could say offensive tackle, you could say linebacker. I definitely think they have to get more athletic at linebacker. Rashaan Evans is a guy they could look at. Leighton Vander Esch, the linebacker from Boise State. He was just a one-year starter, but another athletic kid, had some really good games, had a great game against Oregon. So he's a guy to keep in mind. And Fred Warner, who's probably a reach, I'd say, at 23 or even 31. He's a kid from BYU, very athletic linebacker. I know people like him a lot. He was used at times in the slot, so you can see some versatility with him. But he's somebody that's probably going to be there in the 40s where, if they decide they're going to address other positions, you could go and grab him in the 40s, whatever it is, 43 or 45 if they've got early in the second. Those are some linebackers. Some offensive tackles. Obviously, everybody's talking about Kolton Miller. I'm not as high on him. But he's definitely athletic enough. He's going to need development, and Dante's probably the guy to develop him. So I guess, if you're going to buy into the fact that he's an athletic kid, very athletic profile, almost elite athleticism. So you could probably look at him and say, look, his athletic ability, his burst, his strength, and things like that are going to allow him to stay somewhat productive while he works out the stuff he needs to work out technically. So he could probably work. Matthias Rankin, the kid from Mississippi State, he's getting a lot of late buzz here in the process. He's somebody to watch, but he's probably going to be there in the, in the 40s. And the kid from Oregon, Tyrell Crosby, I think, another good offensive tackle. It's not the best offensive tackle draft. It really starts to fall off. And so they might have to address it earlier. So it might be that they roll with Kolton Miller, who's somebody they've sort of, been linked with recently. Some corners, Mike Hughes is a nice corner. Carlton Davis, the kid from Auburn, is a nice corner. They're not going to be in a position to get Jair Alexander. He's going to go early in the draft, so they probably won't be able to get him. But there are some nice guys late. Anthony Averett, he's more of a diminutive slot type guy from Alabama. He's somebody to keep an eye on. And finally, look, we got to address edge too. Sam Hubbard. People have been talking about Sam Hubbard. Again, he was a converted safety at Ohio State, played some lacrosse, so people like that. He's a guy to keep in mind for the Patriots if they address edge. Other guys like Dorrance Armstrong from Kansas, he's a good player. The kid from Oklahoma, who I just won't even try to pronounce. The double O, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Another edge player to look at. But, they could go in a number of different directions. And, I said on my show the other day, look, we all love to think about them going up to get Rosen or maybe, a Lamar Jackson at 23 or something like that. Let's face it, they're going to go Sam Hubbard. They're going to go Kolton Miller. They're going to address two positions of need. And that's what Belichick's going to do. And while it might not be the sexy move, it's perhaps the right one to address two positions, two guys that can probably plug and play right away and rebuild around, again, Tom Brady.
Right. Yeah, I think you're probably right. It makes more sense. And I think defensively too. And I know there were a lot of, injuries defensively at the end of the year last year, and obviously Butler didn't play in the Super Bowl, but to me, it was painfully obvious that they didn't have any playmakers on defense.
Right.
They just didn't have enough guys. And I think Trey Flowers is still kind of developing. I thought he would kind of turn into that elite edge rusher, and it just didn't really happen for me, at least. Now, he had a decent year, but I was expecting elite level edge rushing from him. And I don't think we really saw that at all this year.
Right.
And that could be, a reflection of the fact that they didn't have great outside linebackers. So he had to set the edge more than he could rush. I don't know scheme wise, but it was like one of those things where I was like, okay, I expected a little bit more out of all those guys. I didn't really get it. And from the linebacker position, it's just like, there's just no playmakers back there. Yeah. And you just, and for me personally, you look at the Super Bowl, and you say, okay, the Patriots score and go up with 9.5 minutes left to go. And the Eagles get the ball way back in their own end, and they drive, all the way down the field, 7.5 minutes, 14 play drive. They convert 2 third downs, a fourth down. Like, they couldn't stop them.
Yep.
And then the Patriots get the ball back and the Eagles stopped them. And it's just like, that's what it takes. You need to have a guy who can make a play on defense. Your defense hasn't made a play all game. Neither defense made a play all game. Yep. And, you have to have one guy that can step and make a play. The Patriots didn't have that guy, and the Eagles did. And that was the difference in the game, I think,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, Super Bowl 52 sort of brought into bright light sort of the way that teams have to approach this game right now, particularly up front on the defensive side of the ball. You have to be athletic, both at, up the front and at the second level with your linebackers, because if you're not, you're going to get beaten, on those third downs when you can just run a little cross and route and get a wide receiver matched up on a linebacker, and the linebacker's just not athletic enough to hang with them. That's number one. And number two, up front, look what the Eagles were able to do. They kick an edge rusher inside, get them matched up on a guard with a speed package of 3 edge rushers, things that have given the Patriots nightmares. Think back to the Giants and those Super Bowls. The Patriots need to do something like that. So they've got to, add another edge or two so you can have the ability to get pressure both on the interior and off the edges as well. And again, like you said, got to be more athletic at the second level. I know they've got some linebackers coming back. You're going to get Hightower coming back, but you still need an injection of athleticism there on those 3rd and 6 situations. The guy that can be in the middle of the field, that can run with linebackers, with receivers if necessary, that can run with running backs if necessary, and make those tackles and get off the field on 3rd down.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. So, okay, I think we really covered the biggest need. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to ask you, was the biggest need, but I think that right there is probably the biggest need for the Patriots. Yeah. Offensively, what do you think? I mean, the Tony Garcia thing is interesting because I think that they tried to prepare for the loss of Solder by drafting Garcia, just like they drafted Solder when Matt Light was going into his last year. And it was like, okay, we have a guy, and they did the same thing with Garcia. And if you look at Solder and Garcia, Solder was clearly more polished and ready for the league, but very similar players, tall, athletic, quick feet, and guys that were skinny, but you could build muscle onto them. Yep. And of course, Garcia gets, the blood clots in his lungs. And so he misses the whole year and lost like 30 or 40 pounds. So now the question will be like, will he even be ready for this year?
Right.
Whereas, I feel like they would have looked at it and said, that guy's going to be ready to play left tackle for us this year if he had been healthy last year. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Do you think that's the biggest need on offense, or, do they need another wide receiver, or what do you think?
Pat, it's interesting. I still think the left tackle, it remains the biggest need. And, they did the right thing, similar to how we've talked about replacing Brady. They were a year ahead of the schedule, like you said, when they drafted Garcia, who was a player that really stood out, 2 years ago at the Senior Bowl. He just looked great down there. He won a lot of people over down there with his athletic ability, his footwork, his hands. This was a guy that really rocketed up draft boards, and then loses his entire rookie season. You do wonder if he's going to be able to come back, be in game shape, ready to go week 1. Can he last a 17-week season? You do wonder about that. So I think they still have to bring in a left tackle or an offensive tackle at some point, whether it's early, whether it's, again, it's not a deep class, but there are a couple of guys you could probably point to, like a Brian O'Neill from Pitt or Alex Kappa, the small kid from Humboldt State. And maybe you say, look, we'll roll with Garcia if we can. If not, we've at least got somebody behind him. Right. I still think that's probably the biggest need. Tight end, I know they just signed Troy Nicholas, but with the Gronkowski rumors, they got basically nothing from Dwayne Allen. It's a good tight end class. I mean, there are guys that you're going to see, in the late first round. The Gesicki kid from Penn State's probably a second-round kid, but very athletic. I mean, just people were just blown away by him at the Senior Bowl. We were just wondering, I mean, where was this? Because at Penn State, he was running 3 routes, basically. He was running to the flat, he was running a wheel route, and he was running a seam route. And that was basically it. And now you see him running posts and digs, and he's a really athletic, and then just tests out the doors when he was in Indianapolis. And so, he's an intriguing name. I don't know if they'd go that route early, but tight end, somewhat of a position of need. And, wide receiver, with the Cooks trade, I thought their wide receiver was a sneaky position of need anyway, because Edelman was hurt. He's coming back off of an injury. You lose Amendola. You might want to look at a slot guy, say day 3, with like a Richie James or a Braxton Berrios, the kid from Miami. You'd probably still do that anyway. So those are 3 areas I think they probably address on offense.
Okay, nice. All right. And then, so you talked about Gronk. What do you think? I mean, do you think I think, in my opinion, I think he's back this year. The only question for me is kind of moving forward. What is he going to do? The whole WWE thing, to me, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I just don't. You hear the guys that are in WWE and they talk about the physical toll that it takes on their bodies, and how hard they work at it and how much work they put into it. And yeah, they're having fun and they're entertaining the crowd, but they're like, it's just as physically demanding as football. And not only that, but I mean, and I know it's obviously they can kind of, tailor it, and he knows what's coming, and it's not like, some guy's taking out your knee. as you're running down the field. But from a like a back standpoint, like if your back is hurt, I don't see how the WWE is going to take any you're going to take any less of a beating there than you would on the football field. So that one to me doesn't make any sense as far as acting is concerned. I don't know what the hell he's going to do with being an actor. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, So I think he's back this year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him retire in the next few years. And so I think you're kind of right about tight end. But what do you think about Gronk?
Yeah, I mean, having thought about Gronk and ever since the end of the Super Bowl and things like that, I really think that part of this is a negotiation ploy more than anything else, because in terms of what Gronk is making, like, yeah, he's the highest paid tight end right now, at least in terms of total value. But then when you dig into the numbers a little bit, he's not the highest paid in terms of average per year. There are guys making much more in terms of average per year. And then in terms of guaranteed money, that's where it really falls off. I mean, I think I'm looking at it right now, 24.4% of his contract is fully guaranteed. That's not much. When you're looking at a guy, again, these are two rookie guys, but O.J. Howard's contract is fully guaranteed. Evan Ingram's contract, 96.5% of it is guaranteed. There are guys that are more like, blocking type tight ends, like a Jermaine Gresham. Nearly half of his contract is fully guaranteed. So I think Gronkowski, I did the numbers, he's like 35th in terms of tight ends, in terms of whether his contract is fully guaranteed or not. There are like 30 guys ahead of him that have more of their contract guaranteed. So I think this is what he's trying to do. He's probably got one more contract in him, because between the injuries, the interests away from football, the fact that, things have taken a toll on him, he's probably got one more deal, and he's probably trying to put himself in a situation where he gets more guaranteed money, because again, he's been saving all of his salary. Remember, that's the story on him. He spends his endorsement money, but he saves his salary money. He probably wants one more better guaranteed contract before he retires, and that's probably what he's angling for. Again, similar to Belichick trying to get into Gronkowski's head. I mean, that's a scary place too, because you've got probably leprechauns, and it's like that Happy Gilmore scene with, the grandma riding the tricycle and stuff. But yeah, I would have to guess that would be it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on board with you with that. And the other part of it too that you have to remember is that he bet on himself last year, right? He took a big incentivized deal where they kind of rewrote his deal and said, hey, you can be the highest paid tight end in the NFL if you reach these thresholds. And then he did. So now he's like, hey, look, we all know what I can do. Don't make me reach these again. Just pay me what I'm worth and guarantee it, so I don't have to worry about that crap.
Yeah, I think so. And
so,
something to consider too with this Cooks trade is, I don't think you make this trade if you're worried that Gronkowski's walking away. I mean, I think if you're worried that he's legitimately going to leave, you don't then trade a 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, even if there's some playbook concerns, even if, we're hearing rumblings that he and Brady weren't always on the same page, it worked for the most part. I mean, it certainly worked at the end of that Houston game. And so, I think the Super Bowl might have been a little bit differently had he not had that injury, had he not gotten knocked out. Maybe, maybe things look a little differently. Who knows? But I think the fact that, they traded him makes me think they're confident that Gronkowski is going to be back at least for next year. And then hopefully they try to work out something where he feels like he can finish his career in New England and on pretty good terms.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. I thought as soon as they made that deal, I was like, oh, that means Gronk's coming back.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, and I don't want to talk bad about Cooks, because I think Cook's a good guy from what everyone said. He's a ridiculously hard worker, first guy in, last guy out type of guy. But I will say the Super Bowl in particular, first of all, the play where he tried to hurdle the guy on third down before the missed field goal, I was like, put your foot in the ground and cut in the middle of the field. You get a first down easily.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Gostowski ends up missing that field goal. And you're like, that could be a huge swing in the game where you pick up 7 points there instead of none. So that's obviously a huge swing. And then even the play where he got knocked out, it's like, what are you doing? Just catch the ball and run forward, or just fall down. But don't just stand there looking at people. It was just.
Yeah, you do almost sense it a wonder if, it was. Again, I don't want to assume anything here, but those were two real lack of awareness type plays. And when a guy's in a Super Bowl like that for the first time, you wonder if, he's trying to do too much in the moment. And it's like, look, just do what got you guys there. Like on that, third down, just make a move. Like you said, put your foot in the ground, cut inside, take the guy on. Don't try to leap over him. I mean, that's stuff you see in like little league games when a guy's trying to hurdle a catcher at home plate. And then, the long catch where he got hurt, get down, make sure you know where you are, like protect yourself. Like bodies are flying all over the place and you've got to be more aware in that situation to protect yourself. And he didn't. And I think it cost him.
Yeah. And then one other thing I'll say about him is that I felt like he had a good year. His numbers were good, but I felt like, it was never he was never the guy where other teams were like, oh my God, we have to stop Brandon Cooks this game. He's going to be a problem and we have to go out and stop him. And sure, he made good plays throughout the year. And obviously, like you said, the Texans game where he made that sensational catch in the, on the side of the end zone. But like, for the most part, it was like, he was good, but he wasn't great. He wasn't like a number one receiver. And I know we're a little bit spoiled here, because we got Gronk was our number one receiver. And the last legit number one receiver we had was Randy Moss. So like, it's kind of not fair to compare him to a guy like Randy Moss and even a guy like Edelman, I think, but to me, it was just like, I never saw that super explosiveness that, people were talking about or that I expected to see. You look at his numbers, his first few years in New Orleans, and I'm like, this guy's going to blow everyone away. He's going to catch balls and take it to the house. And I just never really saw that from him throughout the course of the year. And so when they made the deal, like I said, I was like kind of upset. And then more I thought of it, the more I was like, wow, actually, it turns out to be a pretty good deal. So we'll see. But,
And part of it is you do wonder, they bring in a guy like Brandon Cooks who, people assume is going to be this like deep vertical threat for them. You do wonder if they just look at where Brady is right now. And Brady was never, he can throw the deep ball. He can do it from time to time, but they're not a vertical passing team. They're more of a time and rhythm based offense that works in the short and intermediate areas of the field. You just do wonder if they've, they tried it and they realized, look, it doesn't really fit. Like it's not a schematic fit. And we're sort of wasting a spot where we could get another receiver that's, somebody that works over the middle, that works underneath, that does that kind of stuff, that fits us more offensively. And we can get somebody like that. Maybe we have it in Philip Dorsett. Maybe we get it later in the draft. And it just makes more sense for us from a schematic standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I always felt too, like with Brady, where like you said, his deep ball is okay, but I feel like he's not super accurate with his deep ball. So you almost want a guy like Moss. I mean, obviously Moss is one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, but you want a guy like that who will go up and get the ball. And I feel like Kenny Britt is that type of receiver. Yeah. And so it's like, if you're going to take a shot with, I mean, no, he's not super fast, but if you're going to take a shot with somebody, maybe to be a guy like him where he can jump up and out jump guys and kind of get physical down the field where it doesn't have to be a perfect throw, splitting defenders and stuff. He's just going to go up and get it. I feel like that's more, that helps Brady out a little bit more because Brady's not super accurate with the deep ball.
Yeah. And, it's interesting when, not to rub salt in some wounds here, but when the Eagles made that move with Alshon Jeffrey, my immediate thought was, look, that's the best thing you can do for a quarterback, especially a young quarterback. He's a guy that's going to win in those contested catch situations. And what did we see early in the Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. He wins a contested catch over Eric Rowe for a touchdown. And sometimes quarterbacks need a guy like that they can trust and say, look, I've got a shot here. I'm going to put it up. I'm going to trust this guy to go win the football for me. And maybe that's what they need. Is there a guy like that in this draft? I'm not so sure there is. You might have to do it a little bit early, like a James Washington type, but I don't know. But it's a very good point, Patrick. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see, Now, what do you think? I don't want to go like predictions for the year, but as far as the rest of the offseason, where do you think they address, I guess the question would be like, where do you think they go from here? Do you think that they use all their picks? Do you think they're trading up? Do you think they're trying to trade for some play? Like, I mean, I read somewhere they had, what was it, like one pick in the top 50 in the last like 3 seasons. And like the lowest people be after them was like 4, so they don't have that young talent. So, I mean, I almost look at it and think, keep those 3 picks, get 3 young talented guys to come in, but maybe they decide to trade up. I mean, what, I know we already talked about it a little bit, but what do you think, like,
sitting here
what do you
tonight,
think the end goal for them is?
Yeah, I mean, sitting here tonight, I think this is a draft where, the sweet spot of this draft, I think, is in that sort of 20 to 80 range, because the positions, there are some talented guys up there, but there are positions that, like one of the guys up there is Saquon Barkley. One of the guys up there is Quentin Nelson. Like, I don't think the Patriots are going to like go real gun ho to go get a running back or go get a guard when you've got guards. And so I think this is going to be one of those drafts where I think it would make sense for them. You've got 5 picks basically in that range, although one of them is 95. Use the 5 picks. Like, get 5 guys in that sort of, first, second, third round range, but that can be plug and play types, whether it's a guy that's going to come in and start right away at the edge, or a guy that's going to come in and contribute right away at linebacker, a guy that's going to come in and win the backup quarterback job. I would say it's a Kyle Lauletta at 95 that maybe can take over for Brady in 2 years. If they come away with, an offensive tackle, an edge guy, a linebacker, a corner, and Kyle Lauletta at 95, I think that's a pretty solid draft from them, because you get 4 guys that can contribute, and maybe you do get that next Brady that everybody's been talking about. I think that makes sense to me. But again, Belichick will surprise us.
Right. It's a good point. That's a hell of an answer on the worst question ever asked in the history of podcasting.
I knew exactly what you were going for, buddy. So I'm right there with you, buddy.
I was right there. Nailed it. One thing about Kyle Lauletta that I think is interesting, and we talked about, Belichick kind of doing the opposite of what everyone does. Well, now that we know that he does the opposite of what everyone does, him drafting Lauletta would actually be the opposite of what everyone thinks he's going to do. Right. And so maybe he'll draft Lauletta because now it's the opposite of, and now I've turned my brain into a pretzel. But the point is that, I think that maybe it's a possibility.
Mike Freeman sort of pointed this out yesterday after the Brandon Cooks move on Twitter. He said, look, when Belichick makes a trade, people start to wonder, what is it, what we're missing? Because he's always 2 to 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And so, like you said, Pat, we're starting to overthink the Lauletta love. That just makes him probably that much more likely that he's going to draft it, because he's like looking around. He's saying, oh, everybody's backing off. They're thinking, I don't like the guy. Then I'll go get him.
Right. That's crazy. It's just too, he just, it's so fun to watch him, because he's like, it almost reminds you of like Red Auerbach. And, I remember my dad telling me a story about, Dave Cowens and Red Auerbach went to go watch a Dave Cowens game, and he just sat there with his arms crossed and just arms folded, just like pissed the entire game. And the game ends, and he just walks out and he's just shaking his head, like, pissed off. And Red's got like the number 2 overall pick, and so they don't draft the number 1, and he drafts him number 2, and it's like he turns out to be a Hall of Famer. It's like, and that's just, it feels like that's what he does. Is he just, nobody knows what he's thinking, and so when you look at him and you think you know what he's thinking, then you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's like when they convinced, they didn't convince, but when the Jets thought the Patriots loved the D tackle, what the hell was the D tackle's name? They traded up for and gave up a crap load to draft him, and he sucked. Was it Dwayne? I think it was Dwayne Robertson. And he was like, and the Jets were like, the Patriots want this guy. Like, we have to draft him for the Patriots. And he was like, he was a bum. And the Patriots had zero interest in him whatsoever. But like, it was just kind of that whole convincing and making other people think something's going on,
Yeah. I mean, we saw like 2 weeks ago, I think, when Belichick was at the NC State Pro Day, and he was talking to Bradley Chubb, the defensive end. He's like, we're picking a 31. You're not going to be there for us. Well, now that they made this trade, people are wondering, like, oh, he's going to go to try to get Bradley Chubb because he likes him so much. Of course not. Like, he knows he's not going to go get Bradley Chubb, and that's fine, because he'd rather get another edge player, but it makes people wonder.
Yeah. And without a doubt, the trade makes that first Thursday a lot more exciting for Patriots fans, because usually, that Thursday, it's like, all right, Patriots are trading out, or they're not drafting anyone. Now they get 2 picks, and no one knows what the hell they're going to do. So at least it'll be entertaining. And so, I mean, they could go a number of different ways. The last time you said, like, they had 2 picks in the first round, they traded out, and they traded up and got those 2 guys. But in 06, in 07, they had 2 first-round picks. They traded one to San Francisco. They drafted Joe Staley. They picked up a 4th-round pick and a first-round pick in 08. The 4th-round pick turned out to be Randy Moss, and the first-round pick the next year turned out to be Gerard Mayo. So it's just like, so you never know where they could go with it, but they acquire assets and good things happen. So it's nice to see them have 2 first-round picks and add a little drama into our late April live.
Exactly. And the thing is, evaluation and drafted, it's an inexact science. You're going to miss on guys, and so it's one of those situations where you get more bites of the apple. If you miss on one, but you have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds and hit on the other 4, that's a pretty good return. And so the fact that they've got these assets, I think this is the year to use them all.
Yeah, I like it. That should be fun. So anyways, Mark, where can people find you and interact with you?
Easiest place is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time at Mark Schofield. You can, shoot me messages there. DMs are always open. People asking me for advice all the time. I'm happy to help the best I can. You can follow me at the work over at Inside the Pylon. You can follow the Locked On Patriots podcast. 4 to 5, usually 4 to 5 shows a week. Got a piece up on Pro Football Weekly. I'm contributing over there now, which is incredible because I grew up reading that, and now I'm writing for it, which is nutty. I got a piece up, creating the best draft quarterback out of the, bits and pieces, an arm and a leg. You hear from the other guys. Got a new piece coming the next couple of days on scheme fits with some of the top quarterbacks. But easiest place as always is Twitter at Mark Schofield. You can just find me there.
Yeah, it's cool. I will say, I mean, the show is super informative. Unlike me, I'm just a fan who knows a little bit. You study it, you know what you're doing. You're like super informative and diving deep into things. I mean, anyone that's been listening can hear you when you're talking about, the 7th rated wide receiver, out of East Appalachian State. And you're like, oh, this guy's, a good route runner. And it's like, what? Who's that guy? So, if you're looking for, and it's also entertaining too. So it's not like you just like, yeah, so in the Patriots, I think will draft someone that, so yeah, a little bit of spice into it, but also some good, some really good information. So I think it's a good show. So
I appreciate that a lot, Patrick. I really do. Yeah, it's a fun show to do, and it lets me talk about the Patriots because try so hard to like not be a homer at times. It allows me to bring that side out, which has been fun. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And for me, I'm a season ticket holder, and I've been a season ticket holder. My dad was a season ticket holder since the 60s, awesome. And I've been a season ticket holder since 2000 when I was 16. And I sit in the end zone, and I'm the loudest person in my end zone, and I'm always yelling. And people are like, they can't hear you. And I'm like, I know, but I yell anyways. Right. And so, but now it's like people can hear me. Maybe it's not many, but people can still, I can say whatever I want, and people can hear me, and I can voice my opinions, and it's fun. It's just, it's really fun. It's my first real off season doing it. And so for me, it's like interesting to see kind of where they'll go, and we'll see what happens. So
it's fantastic, man. It's a fun little ride, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Getting the takes out there and seeing how it grows. So man, but anything I can do to help, buddy, let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you. And have a great night. All right.
All right. Take care, Patrick.
All right. Bye. That was great, man.
Awesome,
that was
buddy.
Really good.
Yeah,
thanks.
If there's anything I can do, like, tag me in shows, shoot me a DMs on Twitter. If there's you got a good show, you want me to tweet it out. Happy to do anything I can to help, buddy.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. So now Pro Football Weekly which one is that? Because there's Pro Football Talk with Florio, but that's different.
Yeah, no, this was a legit like magazine that was founded in like 1967. And then it turned to like online only in like 2013.
Oh, and it's got okay. So it's got like the PFW and then like almost like the black I'm just trying to think like the black thing in the back, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome,
It's been a crazy little ride, man.
Good for you. Good for you. Now you're like a journalist. I mean, you're moving around and is this what you do for work?
No, I was actually a lawyer for like 10 years.
Really?
DC area, and I got sick of it, and I was like, look, I want to do something else, and so I just group of people I know from this Sons of Sam Holen website that wrote about football. We were like, oh, let's try writing about football more, frequently than just a couple of message board posts here and there, and so we started Inside the Pylon in August of 2014. And I was like, this is what I'd rather be doing. So I gave up being a lawyer, started doing this, and it's kind of just grown from there. So I'm between ITP and I do work over at Bleacher Report, Washington Post, wherever. I mean, I do a bunch of different things and just piece it all together.
That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, I started doing this. I got picked up by WTP Sports. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they're kind of just internet stuff. But so they run the podcast, but then they were like, if you ever want to blog anything, let me know. And so I've started kind of writing and stuff, and it's just fun. I mean, I teach middle school math, so like, I'm not giving up my job anytime soon. I'm not making any money, but it's just fun. It's fun getting the opinions out there on here, but then also to be able to like write things and write. I've written whatever. I mean, they're mostly just like blogs, but articles about, I feel about this, or this take is wrong, or it's nice to be able to kind of interact with people, because you listen to talk radio and you're like, you idiot, like what do you like I listen to Felger and Maz up here, and Maz is just like, well, they should have kept Jimmy G, and I'm like, but they couldn't. It's not possible without trading Brady. And he's like, well, figure it out. And I'm like, no, you can't. Like, no, they couldn't figure it out. Like, what the hell are you talking? You know, but like, I'm not going to wait on hold for an hour to talk to him because they're not even listening to me anyway. So
yeah, and that's the amazing thing about like this time is that you could go find other outlets. You can go find better people, whether it's podcasts, websites, whatever, and you can block out all that noise. You know, it's not like, 20 years ago when that was it, with sports radio, now, or the Globe or whatever, and that was back when the Globe was good. I mean, now you can go to different websites, you can go to different podcasts. You get so many choices, and it makes, people like us work harder because we know what we're talking about. We'll get our opinions out there and people will find us. So I've said this before. It's a great time to be a football fan because there are so many people out there doing such great work that, you could go find what you want. You don't have to like go listen to sports radio, which is just geared to the lowest common denominator type fan. Like if you're a hardcore fan, you can go find people that are doing hardcore work.
Right. It's nice. It is nice to not have to listen to the hot takes and it's just like, stop, I mean, it is nice to be able to do that because I was actually joking with someone. I'm like, podcasting is the new rapping because, everyone was a rapper and now everyone's a podcaster, but there are people that are talented that do it. And it's like, you don't have to answer to anybody. You could just do it.
Yep.
And you can give your takes and you can be honest and you can say what you feel and you don't have to worry about ratings or like listening to someone or, your boss over your shoulder saying, hey, you need to reach this many people. It's like, no, I just say what I want and go from there. And if people like you, then they listen. And if they don't, then they don't. And you could just keep doing it anyways,
Yeah.
It's nice. So, well, anyways, I will let you go, but
all right, my man.
But like thank you very much.
Reach out anytime you need anything. Like, send me shows, articles. We want me to tweet out. Anything I can do to help, just let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much. Mike, I was telling you, my cousin was the one that told me. I texted him today, and he texted me when he was on the show. He's like, dude, he said you're having him on tonight? He's like, that's so awesome. I'm so excited. So he was pumped. So
awesome, man. Great to hear that.
Yeah. All right, man. Have a great night, all right?
Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
See ya.